If you do this one thing, you'll go bankrupt. That's all there is to it. And it's just sad. So we're going to give you a taste of history. We're going to go back through the post-bellum times of the upcountry Georgia, where I live, the upcountry Georgia. We're going to look at this book from Stephen Hahn, The Roots of Southern Populism. He actually talks about a couple counties that are northeast of me, Jackson County and what's the other one? Jackson, Gwinnett, I can't remember off the top of my head. No, Jackson County, which is northeast of me, and Carroll County, which is west of me. Very interesting. And then we're going to look at my professor, Carrie Meyer's Days on the Family Farm. We're going to talk about both. And if you can avoid these, you will go bankrupt. You will avoid going bankrupt. I'm telling you right now. All right. So let's see. After the war, the physical destruction, economic hardship, short crops, and dramatic decline in livestock brought by the war. And the aftermath, remember Sherman, freaking scumbag, just burned his way through the South. And he burned his way through the South where there were no slaves, from the Shenandoah Valley all the way through upcountry Georgia, all the way to Atlanta, and then the freaking Savannah, where the hell he went. We didn't have slaves up here. It was all just poor white farmers. That's it. And yet he burned us all out. And I'm a Yankee, by the way. You know what I'm saying? But I've been in the Shenandoah Valley. I've been in the South for the bulk of my life now. And he burned us out, destroyed us. Freaking disgusting. There's no slaves. Many were, if not outright unionists, were sympathetic to the Union cause because the Southern yeomen did not want to fight the freaking aristocrats' war to maintain slavery. They didn't. It's just freaking disgusting, dude. Anyway, so they undermined the self-sufficiency of many small-time farmers. With little specie or currency in circulation, goods could rarely be paid for at the time of purchase. Indeed, the rhythms of agriculture governed transactions. Farmers expected to acquire items as needed over the course of the year and then settle those accounts after harvest by means of cash or barter. Interesting, cash or barter. And we see here, under a new law passed, storekeepers could take liens on the crops of farmers and planters and thereby establish a foothold of servicing small farmers by basically extending credit. And by the process of debt defaulting, some storekeepers managed to accumulate huge real estate holdings. Interesting. So we're going to keep going here. You're going to see this commonality here. Really? I mean, ready? Now, most of these farmers pre-Civil War, war of northern aggression, war between states, were self-sufficient, raising crops, livestock, the whole thing. Post-war, because of what Sherman did and all the scumbags and even the southern freaking idiot aristocrats who put up these essentially bounty hunters and stuff for men who would not fight their stupid war, they just destroyed all kinds of livestock, all kinds of crops. It's disgusting. Anyway, so what happened was, though the prices of various food crops may have been favorable on occasion, their bulk and perishability made shipment difficult and often unprofitable. Cotton stood as the most readily marketable agricultural commodity. In short, as a crop most likely to bring returns. So cotton began to step in for cash. In fact, he goes on to say, the acquisition of credit, because you needed credit to be able to buy the foodstuffs you needed to support your own house, demanded an expansion of cotton production because cotton was trading high. And it was not perishable, and it could be easily maneuvered from point A to point B. All right. An expansion of cotton production meant proportionally shorter food crops, and shorter food crops sent the farmer back to the merchant's door for provisions via borrowing. So cotton, because we had railroads now, we could ship it. It wasn't as perishable. All right. It was trading at a higher price because it was high demand after the Civil War in Europe and whatnot, and it commanded a higher price. So we had to increase our expansion of cotton, which meant we decreased our expansion of food crops, which meant we really needed to rely on the merchants for more food that they were getting from the West in order to live, because we're too focused on cotton prices or cotton growing. All right. So then we said, hey, we had to go back to the merchant for more liens. Cotton made the fortunes of the Old South. Despite periodic downswings in price, the burgeoning Industrial Revolution generated tremendous demand for the fiber, which the South virtually alone supplied, creating highly favorable conditions on the international market. So if you're a farmer and your livestock's done, and you're like, I can make bank on cotton. I'm going to put everything I can in cotton, less on foodstuffs. And I'm going to take liens, allow the merchants to borrow, to take essentially a mortgage against my land so I can pay them back for what I need provisions when I sell my cotton to them. But check this out. But during the post-war era, conditions on the world market underwent important, and for the South, detrimental changes. The seemingly insatiable demand for cotton began to plateau at precisely the time of new sources of supply from Egypt and India became available. What does that happen to prices? Demand starts leveling off, if not falling. Supply increases. Take a wild guess what happens to prices of cotton. A pound of cotton commanded about 11 cents in 1875, 9 cents in 1885, and less than 5 cents in 1894. So it went from 11 to 9 to less than 5 in 20 years. Well below the cost of production. At the close of the war, a 500-pound bale of cotton would bring in $100 to the Cherokee County farmer. Today, in 1891, it'll bring in $32.50. The South found itself prolonged in a depression at the servant of northern industrial might. Petty producers, white and black, landed and landless in the upcountry and the Black Belt, found themselves increasingly mired in position tantamount to debt peonage. So the merchants are gathering control over the farmers, but it's worse than that. The merchants' growing control of the upcountry marketplace came particularly at the expense of local artisans. Confirming fears that surfaced as early as the 1850s that the railroads and facilitating the influx of finished goods at lower cost struck hard at producers doing custom work for their neighbors. By 1880, fewer than 5% of white households were in trades anymore. So basically what's happening, because we're getting imports from the West, India and Egypt are also supplying cotton. The price of cotton is going way down. And then on top of that, the laborers or the artisans are losing their businesses as well. And so they had to take on debt too. Very interesting. So what does that happen now? The control of debt became highly concentrated. We find that 10%, the top 10% increased their share of the total value owed to them from about 50% to 70% during the post-bellum times. I just posted this on my various socials. I don't know if you can see this or not, but look at that. The share of debt right there. Jackson County and Carroll County. The top decile went from, in 1850, 52% of the debts to 73.1%. Carroll County, 50 to 72 points. So you got the highest classes having the most debt owed to them. And so now important changes occurred as commercial agriculture took hold. It was not that the currency supply expanded with virtually no banking facilities in the upcountry and monetary contraction nationwide. The currency shortage remained chronic. It was instead that cotton became the predominant money commodity. Storekeepers advertising goods for all kinds of country products came to be the exception rather than the rule. Interesting. In fact, instead of saying we'll barter for anything, we're saying right now we'll take cash or cotton. But what's happened to cotton prices? I already told you. The post-bellum upcountry farmer was haunted now by the fluctuations of worldwide supply and demand of cotton, the problem of the overproduction and the collapsing prices. As yeomen turned their energies to cotton production and were confronted with both exorbitant credit rates and declining prices, the auction block increasingly became the resort for the hopelessly indebted. By virtue of mortgage foreclosures or bidding at public auction, merchants availed themselves of the opportunity to accumulate land. Sheriff advertisements, in the words of the Gwinnett County paper, were as long as your arm. And Jackson Herald indicated that sale day brought heavy trafficking in real estate. With over 3,000 acres sold, the paper reckoned it was to be one of the biggest sales in the history of Jackson County because they're going to they're going to auction because they're selling off their land because they can't afford it. The merchants' accumulation of land did not lead to the emergence of antebellum style plantations. Although some did own large tracts of lands, their holding consisted, for the most part, of small units scattered over a district or two, perhaps over the entire county, and farmed now by, instead of landholders, tenants and croppers. We got a list here of the people who owned a bunch of land in 1885 and how much they owned 5 years later. You can see his first guy, Lapierre, owned 545 acres in 1885, and Jackson then he owned 1630 in 1890. You can see it. 200 for this guy right here. Elbert Askew owned 200. Now he owned 565. Look at this guy right here. L. Hardman owned, Williamson owned 6 and 735. And here's Will Carrollton, a Cherokee County farmer. Cherokee County just 5 miles that way. We worked through spring and summer, through winter and fall, but the mortgage worked the hardest and the steadiest of them all. It worked on night and Sunday. It worked each holiday. It settled down among us, and it never went away. It's from Kerry Meyer's book, again, Days on the Family Farm. It just breaks your heart, man, when you think about it, but here we go. For the most part, the life of the farm was better than to be on the street. Despite plunging farm prices and worsening drought, people on Midwestern farms had food to eat and work to do. Although the nearly 1 million farmers across the country lost their farms to foreclosure in the early 1930s, these farmers were in the minority. Even those who suffered foreclosure often continued farming as tenants. Well, you don't want to farm as a tenant. Most farmers carried only light debts or none at all and had little fear of losing their livelihoods or homes in these uncertain times because of debts. And then the prices of the farms going down. And there's 2 lessons here, dude. 2 lessons, unequivocally. So what happened is, after the end, during World War I, there's a mass credit expansion for people from the federal government to encourage farming to farmers' crops so we could ship overseas for the war effort. And then after that, when the Europe was destroyed, we say, hey, man, borrow so we can expand our supply so we can ship overseas. And then when Europe finally got back on its feet, people were like, but they still had these massive debts, disgusting. And that's in the from 1915, 16, 17 and on, and obviously the Great Depression. When the debts came calling and you were relying on your crop to provide the income to pay the debts. Let me just show you something here on the price of cotton, for instance. You can see right here, 1860, 1870, price in a pound. Look at that, huge increase in cotton. This exact same thing happened in World War I. Then it went down, but look at this. 35 cents in 1865, 7.5 cents in 1900. And remember, one of the reasons why they're farming cotton so much is because a lot of their sons got killed and maimed in the war. And so they said, we got to farm the most profitable thing we can because we don't have the labor for this. And they took on debts to the merchants, took on debts to the government in the 1910s, the 1920s. And then when the price went down because of increased supply, and in cotton's case, increase in supply and less in demand, it all went plummet. So I was talking to a guy the other day. He had well more than enough to pay off his mortgage. His mortgage is 3 3/4, or 3 7/8 is what it was. I said, he goes, I want to pay off my mortgage. I said, dude, I get it. And you got the cash flow to do it, but yeah, I don't think he should, because a mortgage at this age is just paying his principal back. You know what I'm saying? Because he already paid the interest. I said, you shouldn't do it. But he had more than enough cash in his savings account to pay off the mortgage. I said, basically getting higher increase in returns on your savings account than you are on your mortgage right now anyway, because you're not paying hardly any mortgage interest anymore. But that's not like these guys. When your credit is you're just day to day, I need this. I need to work to pay off my debts. I need this profit to pay off my debts. You've got to do whatever you can to get out from that, dude. Because I'm there, man. 100%. I'm there. You know what I'm saying? If YouTube bans me and you guys turn around and say, I hate Auburn, Josh, you suck, I don't like your t-shirt, well, at least it's on correct this time. My ass is cooked. But at least I got tons of equity. So I could always downsize. You know what I'm saying? But if you're just on that line, what's that King song? The thin red line or something like that. Maybe let's look that up. Such a great song, Living on a Thin Line. All the stories have been told of kings in days of old, but there's no England now. All the wars that were won and lost somehow don't matter very much anymore. All the lies we were told, all the lies of the people running around, their castles have burned. Now it's time to learn there's no England now. Yeah, this is not you got to stay out of debt as much as you possibly can. You've got to stay out of debt, dude, because debt will destroy you. That's all there is to it. So if you got kids and you got financial resources, you got to help the kids get out of debt. Buy off, freaking pay off their student loans, buy them a first car, freaking help with a down payment. Dude, debt, we all got to take debt. I get it. And debt, I get it. But debt just destroys communities, man. It destroys communities and destroys cultures. There's no two ways around that. Anyway. All right. God bless. Love your thoughts. We'll see you.